So I would say overall reading this book, I enjoy it. It's heavy, not just in weight, but also in material. It doesn't just give you just the rules. It gives you, it tries to draw you into the Star Trek universe.
Lots of in-game material, in-universe material. Yes.
Yeah, there's so many Easter eggs
Yep.
I mean, there was points that we were discussing before where they referenced something, and I have to okay, what I remember this, but that was from that one episode that I watched maybe 10 years ago. So I had to go kind of Google it and try to oh yeah, that's right. I remember that episode now, and it's amazing how these writers pull all that information into this book. It's hard to explain unless you look through the book really yourself about how deep, how immersive and how packed full of information this book is.
It is. It's just steeped in the lore of Star Trek.
But
all the different series.
Yes. So let's talk about the rule system for this game. You can use D20s and D6s for this, but it'd be more helpful if you buy Modiphius's dice set for this game. It's how would you describe it?
Well, the D20s are pretty standard D20s. They have a little Star Trek symbol for the 1 because that's a critical success. But it's these D6s that are really helpful. These are called challenge dice, and they're not numbered 1 through 6. They're numbered 1 and 2, and then there are the two Star Trek insignias, and then there are 2 blank sides. So there's a little chart in the book telling you how to use a normal D6, but you'd have to keep referring to the chart. So these are actually quite helpful to have those. And these are sold as a set. So if you buy these, you'll get some of those.
Yeah. Oh, and just to be clear too, this map that we're showing you, this comes with the screen for this game.
Yes.
As you can see from
this
there.
is the screen here. My first piece of advice is if you're going to run this game is buy the screen. It is a great, it's a good serviceable system. I like it, but it is complicated. So the screen gives you all sorts of great information. Comes with reference charts as well, with extra rules, including several different copies rule summary that you can hand out to the players. Screen is very useful, is very well put together, really high quality. The production level on this whole game is very, very good. What I liked about the rule system, 2 particular things I liked about it, is that one, it makes the assumption that every character is an expert in his or her field, which makes sense, because the default setting is Starfleet. You're a character in Starfleet. You might not be in a ship. You could be on a star base or a colony, both of which are talked about. But you are assumed to have graduated the academy, and you're the best of the best, sir. You're really good at what you do, and so the system assumes that. It also, your successes on your rolls generate something called momentum, which we'll get into. It's a big part of the system. And that momentum goes into a common pool that all the players can draw from, which I really like because that really encourages teamwork that you see in Starfleet. So you're not only an expert, you're on a team of experts working together. And I think the system reflects that. So that's really a nice touch.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we talked about before, about game mastering this system. Now, most systems, they kind of tell you that, okay, you're the one that paints the picture, and you paint the scenario, and then you tell the players what's happening. But it seems to break it down even further than that. Like, you have to do a scenario, you have to do a task, things like that. Would you like to? Well,
it does have, it does include more detailed rules for running the game. A location or an object in the game will have a trait, which will be advantageous or a complication, and those have specific effects on the game, and those can be affected by the players. They can add advantages or they can remove complications, which could be very helpful. I've been running games for a long time, so personally, I thought that was a little intrusive, a little bit of a crutch for what I do naturally. But for someone who hasn't run games as often, it could be very useful. There's also a system of, well, we mentioned momentum briefly, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves because we haven't actually explained what momentum is.
I want to talk a little bit about how I feel about role-playing Star Trek. Now, before I looked at these books, the idea of role-playing Star Trek seemed like, to me, a really bad idea. Not because I think Star Trek is bad. I love Star Trek. I mean, Matt and I,
huge Trekkies.
Yeah, we always talk about what episodes we like, and I tend to favor like the Klingon episodes or especially the time travel episodes. Those are the Next Gen and original series. Those are fantastic. But I couldn't imagine role playing in Star Trek because to me you have to be it has to be a very special type of campaign. Like exploring doesn't sound exciting to me when you're role playing it. When I like scientific discoveries, that's what I'm meaning, and that's what I think of Star Trek. That's what I love about Star Trek is the exploration aspect, the discussion of morals and ethics. That one episode whether or not Data was a robot or a living being, and whether or not he had rights in season 2 of The Next Generation.
Sure. Yep.
That was a very
Measure of a Man, I believe it was.
Yes. To me, that was a very important episode. To me, it was a great work of science fiction. So I just couldn't imagine, like, to me, Star Wars is a much easier setting to play because there's so much action happening. And that's the thing with role playing is you need action in order to keep the flow going. It's really hard to do just a straight adventure, just on exploring alone. At least in my mind, I had a hard time thinking how this could work. Okay. And what I like about this is that, how we mentioned before that they keep referencing a lot of Easter eggs and everything. I like that a lot because it made me rethink how to like role play or even game master Star Trek. Maybe think like there's some really great episodes. There's this one episode of Next Generation, and feel free to comment which season and which episode of Next Generation this is. But it's the one where they were devolving.
Oh yes.
And that was kind of like a horror setting. Yeah. There's some episodes where there's a lot of like horror elements, you could say.
Yeah.
A lot of like fear and everything, and I love those.
The power even went out, so it was all dark.
Yeah, that's the idea of the unknown, and I was thinking, I can do this. I can game master a session like that elements of fear into it. And then I was thinking about the Klingons again, and I was thinking, that contention and between the Klingons and the Federation, and they're trying to keep peace, but Klingons and peace don't really mix well together. So I was thinking, I could do an adventure about this, and I really like this book because it does a really good job and made me rethink of how to play science fiction in general, especially Star Trek. I really like how this book is structured. I'll show clips of this in the video so you can understand what I mean of some of the art and how the book is laid out. But it's dense. There's so much material in here. It goes from, besides character creation, it goes into like the beliefs of different systems and starships. And you would think that the only thing you would care about is just, all right, can my starship shoot and defend? But there's also all these like caretaking things you need to do. You need to worry about the engine core. You need to know the very good specifics of how you run your ship. The different decks and what's the functions of each deck and the crew members. What characters should you pick? What your team should be like? How does that affect everything? There's a great system in here. I guess we'll talk about it later or now about supporting characters that you could, so that the flow of the game and the spirit of the game, actually, I'll just say, it's not affected by having all your main characters to go out on a planet, which I have to say, with the original series, I always felt that was kind of weird that the captain of the ship would go down and explore as well.
Yeah,
I understand for ratings and so forth and everything, but to me, like, that's if it's especially if it's a diplomatic mission, you don't want to send your best people and they all died, and you're kind of screwed. But which I like with Next Generation, always send number one down there a lot, which to me that made sense.
That did make sense.
But it shows that sometimes the person working in engineering can't go down to beam down with the crew and explore the planet or deal with the diplomatic relations down there. So they have these supporting characters that you could play so that you could still be part of the game session. Where I think that's really cool. I was wondering about that one about Star Trek. Like, all right, you can't have Hulk always going down doing the same things.
Right. The underlying. One of the underlying assumptions of role playing for the last 40 years has been that it's a ensemble buddy cop adventure story. I mean, like, so everybody in your motley crew of adventures goes everywhere and does everything together. Which obviously makes sense because we're all sitting at the table and we all want to play, but that doesn't work for every story. Yeah. So having secondary characters makes a lot of sense. You know, I'm playing the chief engineer. Well, I have no reason to send my character on this away mission, and yet I'm a player. I don't want to miss it, so I'm going to send Ensign Johnson here. He's my alter ego. He's going to go down on the planet.
Yeah, I think Star Wars has spoiled me a bit, because with any Star Wars adventure, usually the whole crew does everything together. And it's...
Exactly. Star Wars is... I love Star Wars, but Star Wars is, I think the term now used is space opera or space fantasy. It's not science fiction. You know, so the idea is that everybody gets together and runs around and has fun, right? In Return of the Jedi, Han Solo was a general or something, and yet he's running around in the woods shooting people. That is not what generals do. Generals do not run around in the woods and shoot people. So in Star Trek, you know, admirals don't run around in the woods and shoot people. So the game allows you to play other people.
Yeah. And although Star Trek emphasizes fun, I find it takes itself seriously, but in a good way, because it wants you to play this game as if this is Star Trek, not just any random generic sci-fi RPG. But yeah, this is everything you need is in this book. With D&D, you need the Player's Handbook, DMG, the Monster Manual. But everything you really needs right here. It even has an adventure at the end, so that you can play and get the feel of the game. Let's see, the artwork is it's beautiful. You know, I'm so impressed with the level of I love the different images they have, like the races. They have a lot of conflicting. It's not just like pre-pictures of space. It's just like, for example, with this one here. You know, there's something happening here.
Yes, the chapter about the scientific method.
Yeah.
Literally. That's...
You know, but yeah, that's the thing though. It's like with this system, with this game, it makes even something like that really exciting because you don't know what's gonna happen, and you could break time, you could break science of some way. You know, it's
so. You mentioned the art.
Yes.
What did you think about their decision not to use any screenshots? Because in the previous editions of Star Trek, I have a Last Unicorn, I think it was, or something Unicorn. Anyway, they had a Star Trek game, very good game, and all the pictures were screenshots of mostly the Next Generation, because that's what the time period of the book. But here, they quite deliberately did not use any of the screenshots. So what did you think about that?
I think I like that better. Because they paint scenarios for you so that it, to me as a game master, it gives me like, oh, I'd like to do something like this in my campaign. I'm wondering if they didn't use the photos, it's because of some sort of legal or rights issues.
Well, yeah, that's the prosaic answer. that could very well be it.
What do you think about? I mean, do you feel that using painted images instead of using photos, do you think that helps or hurts the book?
Well, my first reaction, of course, was just a little disappointment because Star Trek is a show. It's on the screen. I mean, obviously there are books and everything, but I know it from the screen, and so it has some fantastic visuals. But when I started looking through it, I think I get to really like the art. The art's very good and very consistent, and I think I understood why they might have done it. Besides their lawyers, because it allows them the freedom to make new scenarios and do things. If you're using screenshots, you are constricted by what's on the screen. You can only show someone has to have filmed it before you can show it. So these guys get to make up whatever they like, and I think it worked really well, particularly doing all one or the other. I don't think a mix would have worked too well, but I do love the art, and I think they made a good choice. It works for me.
Yeah, and I noticed they used like a realistic tone with the style of art. It's not very cartoony.
No, it isn't. Very violent, actually. They really the art really plays up the adventure.
Yeah,
lots of people jumping around and shooting, which is okay.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe they thought the same thing, that they're worried that people tend to not get excited about Star Trek enough. They don't think it's not actiony enough.
Well, it's Star Trek Adventures. It's right there in the title.
Yeah, I think they're trying to push it like, hey, you can have a lot of fun with this system, and there's a lot of stuff happening. And again, I think they do a really good job with that. There's a lot of huge sections in this book. There's one on starships. It's huge, and when you read it, you realize it's needed, and I'm really glad for that because again, it makes it much more serious. And Star Trek's all about science, even if it's pseudoscience, but science nonetheless. And I love the design of the book. It looks like you're at the monitor, even the rules summaries.
Yep.
It looks like you're at the computer and touching things, and it looks like you fit in right in that world.
It does, although don't be fooled by the numbers. When you look up some of these things, now I can't find one, but they'll have numbers here. Those numbers don't mean anything. They're not references to anything. They're just there to complete the illusion. So that threw me off the first time. But no, I like the look. It looks like a next generation monitor. That's really cool.
But there's I think 8 races you can choose from in the beginning, including human. There's also for Game Masters, there's NPCs in the back, so that there's very familiar characters that you could bring in. They do a great job of talking about some of the encounters that they faced in the past, like the Borg, obviously. They mentioned Q, the Continuum. Of course, the Romulan, the Klingons. So it does a really good job. Like if you don't have to get the other books, that's fine. This is more than sufficient for a campaign. There are source books, of course, that deal with specifics, Alpha Quadrant, Beta Quadrant, and so forth. But this is more than enough. I think personally, I could probably play this for a whole year without feeling I exhausted all the materials that I can from this book.
Sure. And of course, doesn't hurt that it has 30 years worth of material behind it. So.
Yes, well. and it's very specific about timelines. It'll let you know that certain races aren't included in it because it didn't exist before or weren't introduced yet before Next Generation.
I have been a Trekkie for over 30 years. So when I read the book, I was trying to decide how a complete newcomer would find this book. And it was difficult for me to forget 30 years of loving Trek. I think the book would be accessible to someone who never heard of Star Trek. Although, to be honest, I can't imagine why someone who never heard of Star Trek would be picking up the book. So I think it's quite forgivable for them to be aimed at Trekkies. What did you think? Is there anybody who hasn't heard of Star Trek? And if they hadn't, okay, let's say someone who had very casually heard of it, because everybody's going to have heard of it in the Western world. So, but if they were new to Star Trek with this book, be a sufficient introduction? Would they be able to pick this book up and play?
I think if you haven't heard of Star Trek, or if you don't even like Star Trek, this book's not for you. This is not I feel like this is not really a generic sci-fi role-playing book. You know, it's not made for Star Trek newbies. Assuming that you love the show, you love the series, and you love the universe. I think though it feels like it caters more to newbie role players than newbie Star Trek. And I say that because of the way they talk about game mastering.
Mm-hmm.
Like
that's true.
Like we mentioned before that the way they introduce game mastering is like in pieces. Like, this is the scenario, and these are the objectives you have to do just to get out of the scenario that you're in. You know, and an example they use is that they're on another ship, and this medic's trying to help a Klingon. This Klingon's resisting, and so that's one of the tasks and things that they have to do in this objective. And I think if you're new and you really want to do Star Trek, or even just want to do Star Trek in general, I think if you want to try that, that's fine. You know, but I think as someone that's played a long time, I would personally probably skip all that. I would just say this is not the this is what's happening right now. You're in a ship. You see a hurt Klingon on the floor. You see the controls over there are sparking on the side. What do you do? You know, you have an engineer, you have a medic, and you have a second in command with you. What do you do? And then you just tell me what happens, and we'll just play from there.
Yeah, a little more organically than that it breaks down the system.
Yeah.
Now, again, I think as you were saying, having it so compartmentalized and formulated isn't bad. It's just a little different than you and I are playing. We've been doing this for a long time, so we're a little more fluid and organic in that. But again, having the roles isn't a bad thing, because you can always just pick and choose the rules you want.
Yeah. And speaking of rules, I have to say I do like the rule system in this game, the 2D20 system. What I like about it is that it makes, at least with this system, with Star Trek, it fits well. Mm-hmm. Like, I think trying to do your skill checks, as you say, even though I don't think they use that term here.
Tasks. They call them, yeah.
It's unique, and it fits with the system. And we'll talk about that more once we play.
Okay. Yeah. But the only thing I would have to say in general about the system is that Star Trek is very important to me. I love Star Wars and all sorts of other science fiction. Star Trek holds a special place. Star Trek is not just a television show or science fiction. It's not just entertainment. Star Trek is important because Star Trek is the one piece of at least film science fiction where we get an optimistic view of the future. It's something we can look forward to and strive for. There's nothing in Star Wars that you can strive for, really.
Yeah, you mentioned once to me, and I feel like that's what makes Star Trek so different from Star Wars is that you see scientists name things because of Star Trek. You see them build things because of Star Trek.
Sure, a hypospray, and the computer disk, and some guy came up with a warp drive. I mean, in theory, but and it's named after him. I forget what it's called, but it's the warp drive, and that's because Star Trek holds up, an ideal to strive for, common humanity, and I don't want to get all too highfalutin here, and I don't want to get carried away, but Star Trek is important. And I think this game reflects that. It's an adventure game. Lots of shooting things, lots of blowing things up. But at its core, it's about, going out into the universe and discovering new things and helping people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very well done in that regard.
Yeah. Thank you for watching. I hope this review has been helpful to you. Please let us know in the comments whether or not... your thoughts about it. Do you like this video? Would you like to see more Star Trek role-playing scenarios? There'll be another video of our kind of testing out the system and the rules somewhere in this channel. And yeah, is there any last words?
Just live long and prosper.
Take care, everyone, and thank you.